We light our candles each week, one in honor of Wiley Dobbs, who lives in prison in Georgia, one in honor of our friends Kim and Stan and our other friends in Cuba, one in honor and in memory of all of those who have been impacted by police brutality and violence, and one in honor of those and in memory of those who have been impacted by COVID, and one for each of you from wherever you join us for worship.
This is Jacob's blessing, written by Jan Richardson. If this blessing were easy, anyone could claim it.
As it is, I am here to tell you that it will take some work.
This is a blessing that visits you in the struggling,
In the wrestling,
in the striving,
this is the blessing that comes after you have left everything behind,
after you have stepped out,
after you have crossed into that realm.
beyond every landmark you have known.
This is the blessing that takes all night to find,
It's not that this blessing is so difficult,
as if it were not filled with grace.
or with a love that lives in every line,
It's simply that it requires you to want it, to ask for it.
to place yourself in its path,
It demands that you stand to meet it when it arrives,
that you stretch yourself in ways you didn't know you could move.
that you agree to not give up.
So when this blessing comes,
Born in the hands of the difficult angel who has chosen you,
do not let go.
give yourself into its grip.
It will wound you
But I tell you, there will come a day
when what felt to you like limping,
was something more like dancing,
as you moved into the cadence of your new and blessed name.
You say your heart's been turned to stone. You say you wanna be left alone. You say love only made you weep and moan. Well, let me tell you something that you know in your bones. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock. You say your soul's like a dry riverbed. Stopped waiting for the water long ago. You said you better pray all night for the rain instead. 'Cause love comes like a tidal wave over your head. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock. You say waiting for love takes too long. It dulls the sharp mind, weakens the strong. Well, you may be right, but you may be wrong. 'Cause love can make a mountain come tumbling down. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock. The river washes over every woman and man. Feet in the gravel and mud in your hands. But nothing can stand against love's command. Every boulder turns into a grain of sand. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the water that wears down the rock. Love is the power that won't be stopped. Love is the water that wears down the rock.
The Gospel of Matthew gives us these words from Jesus. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. As you join us wherever you are for worship this week, we welcome you. We welcome you if you are weary. We welcome you if you are filled with endless energy. We welcome you if you feel weighed down by heavy burdens. We welcome you if you feel light and full of joy. We welcome you if you are confused. We welcome you if you have more questions than answers. We welcome you if you are filled with doubt. We hope that you find space in this service, a space of rest and renewal for your soul and your spirit. We hope that you find in this time a place where you can bring your burdens and lay them down, even if just for a few minutes. We invite you to take a few deep breaths as we join our hearts together in all the various places where we find ourselves. Wherever you are in this moment, welcome.
Welcome, my friends. Welcome to our Circle of Mercy time for our story. I am so glad that you could come join us today. See, all of our friends have gathered here together, and we have a story. So, are you all ready? Let's make sure everybody gets in their place. Are you comfortable? Okay. Now, this story is one, well, we told it a few weeks ago, but I have a part of the story that I want to remind you of once again, because it is about Jacob and his struggling through the night. And I know that you are struggling these days with all kinds of things. You're struggling, wondering what's going to happen about school, and how's it going to be, and will you get to see your friends, and how are you going to learn those lessons, and so many of them may be online. Oh, there's some struggle going on. So Jacob, do you have some words that you could help us with in our times of struggle? You'll remember that Jacob and Esau, they were twin brothers, and they struggled and they had fights. And we heard that Jacob stole the birthright blessing from Esau. Maybe he had every right to be angry, because what did that mean? Didn't everybody have a good birthright? And didn't everyone was created by God? And all of us the same, loved by God? Maybe Jacob had some reason to be angry. But what happened was that they had a split. And Esau went to live a long way off. And Jacob, when he got to older and older, he said, I think I need to make peace with my brother. So he took off on a long journey, and he crossed the river. And there, after he crossed the river, he had all the struggles of his heart coming out. And he wrestled and wrestled. And the story says maybe he was wrestling with an angel. But maybe the angel was saying, Jacob, what's in your heart? Let's see. Oh, you have anger? Here, Jacob, let me help you hold that. Jacob, you have fear? Oh, I can see that. Oh, let me help hold you in your fears. And Jacob, you have sadness? Oh, of course you have sadness. Here, let me help comfort you. I know all these things are inside of you, and you wrestle with them. But Jacob, you're not wrestling alone. And through that night, Jacob was able to remember God was with him no matter what. When the angel went away, Jacob was left limping, but he limped across the river and onto some stones. When he overturned the stones, he saw, oh yes, when I am afraid, I will trust in you, God. And Jacob's limp on his journey reminded him that God was with him in all the struggles. He could trust God. Now look around you. You see, you're not alone in your struggles. Jacob had struggles, and so do you, and so does everybody else. We can help each other. We can hold each other tight. And we can comfort each other and help each other through our fears. Yes, God is with us. Thanks be to God. The peace of Christ be with you all. Amen.
This week's lectionary provides us a story from Genesis about Jacob. The context is Jacob's impending reunion with his brother Esau, whom he had grievously wronged. At this point, neither Jacob nor Esau were young men. In many years of travel and adventure, Jacob had accumulated 4 wives, many sons, oxen, asses, flocks, men servants, maid servants. He was the very picture of Old Testament upward mobility. But the uncertainty of meeting his brother again and the possibility or even likelihood of deadly violence from a man who had once pledged to kill him returned Jacob psychologically to square one. Jacob had sent messengers ahead to tell Esau that he was coming, but despite their entreaties on his behalf for reconciliation and goodwill, Esau's mind remained a mystery. Jacob only knew that his brother intended to meet him out on the road with 400 men. Jacob felt so vulnerable and afraid that he divided his host into two companies so that if one were slaughtered, the other might still have a chance to escape with their lives. Jacob was afraid, so that he even sent both companies, his wives and his children, ahead to make contact with Esau first, postponing a personal meeting until he had a better grasp on the situation. And then something strange happened. And this is our text from Genesis chapter 32. The same night, he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. So, definitely an odd little episode. Jacob gets into an all-night wrestling match with an unknown assailant and is able to hold his own. When his opponent eventually tries to tap out, Jacob refuses to let him go unless and until he extracts a blessing from the man. Jacob gets the blessing, but not only that, he gets a new name, Israel. As the sun comes up, Jacob realizes that this botched mugging had actually been an encounter with the divine. Jacob then marks the occasion, as he was frequently wont to do, by naming the place where it happened. Thankfully, he had already sent his flocks and goods on before him. And so here we are spared for once the accompanying obligatory stacking of rocks, pouring of oil, and blood sacrifices. The story of Jacob wrestling with God and receiving a new name is a key moment in the histories of the Abrahamic religions. The enigmatic way in which the story is told, and especially the identity of Jacob's opponent, has invited veritable truckloads of rabbinic and Christian theological interpretation. Across the centuries, learned men have defended pet theories about particular angels or other beings from the heavenly court, or simply concluded that the man was Yahweh himself, or the pre-incarnate Christ, or maybe it was all just a vision sent by God which Jacob hallucinated. Not to be outdone, I myself once speculated in an assigned paper back in seminary that the figure's disinclination to watching the sunrise suggested the possibility of a Hebrew folkloric tradition akin to our stories of vampires and the undead. I thought it was a good idea. If memory serves, my professor, not so much. Likewise, there has been much attention paid to the matter of Jacob's renaming and its importance in the history of God's chosen people. But as with the quest to unmask the mystery wrestler, I have to confess my own disinterest. I still like this story now for the same reason I liked it when I first heard it long ago in Sunday school. If you stop to think about it, it's fun to hear and to tell for the same reason that Jack tales are fun. The plot's very simple. There's actual wrestling involved, something boys and girls know and understand. And Jacob, the protagonist, not only wins a fight rolling around on the ground in the dark, but like Jack putting one over on the giants, his tenacity allows him to leverage his victory for some extra goodies. And I really like the simplicity and concreteness of the story's final image, the sun rising on Jacob as he limps away. But the story carries deeper resonance as well. Just as Jacob found himself ambushed beside a river one dark night, so do we also live amid uninvited struggle and conflict. We live in a world we didn't choose, in which police officers have been instruments of racial terror. In our country, predatory billionaires strip mine the public commons and pack the nation's courts and legislatures with lackeys. Demagogues heap contempt on democratic norms and institutions. The assault on our safety and well-being even extends to the grandest of scales, in the form of Earth's ongoing 6th mass extinction event, this one entirely human-caused. Mother Nature is being tortured. Her climate is warming more quickly than at any other time in the geological record, and many of her beautiful and diverse children are dying. We could make a long, long list of such things, coming at us relentlessly from the darkest places of our imaginations. None of us ever asked to live in a world riven by hatred, injustice, danger, and violence, but here we are anyway. And we can see ourselves fully in the person of Jacob, our own culpability and complexity mirrored in his story. For Jacob, as revealed in Genesis, was as multidimensional as any of us. He knew fear, what it was like to be powerless and afraid. But just as often as he was a victim, he was also a victimizer. He cheated people, only then later to be cheated himself in turn. He was the favorite of his mother Rebekah, but he knew as well the rejection of Isaac, his father, who preferred his brother Esau over him. Did he learn from these early vivid lessons of family dysfunction? Evidently not, because he repeated the same mistakes with his own sons, with even more catastrophic results. Jacob is pathetic, in the root sense of the word, as being one who is imbued with pathos, who awakens in us feelings of recognition and identification, sympathy and pity. Jacob's life covers fully half of the book of Genesis, and it's like our own lives are written there. Jacob's unusual relatability is one reason why I think we can learn from how he handled not only adversity, but an actual adversary. For adversaries are truly what? White supremacy, or misogyny, or the climate crisis, or the full-throated blasphemy, which is capitalism, each embody. These and more are not abstract moral exercises through which we challenge and better ourselves, so much as existential threats, casting doubt upon the very fact of the future should we falter and fail against them. We are set upon. Much like Jacob at the riverbank, our opponent is slippery and determined, taking us to the point of exhaustion and beyond. So how can we prevail in these fights? Only someone with the outlandish confidence of the Apostle Paul will attempt to answer such a question definitively, describing as he did with metaphysical precision the present reign and future downfall of principalities and powers as they run aground upon the rock of the risen Christ. I'm not nearly so ambitious as that, but I can offer testimony about what I have seen firsthand. As most of you already know, on July 5th, the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline was jettisoned by its owners, Duke Energy and Dominion Energy, as dead weight and a lost cause. At one time, the 600-mile fracked gas pipe seemed as inevitable as the billions of dollars backing it, rigging the system in its favor, and in effect, buying politicians and regulators in 3 states and the federal government. But what an amazing grassroots backlash it generated. Farmers, landowners, indigenous groups, Black-led civil rights groups, climate activists, environmental legal nonprofits, anti-fracking community organizations, consumer protection advocates, clean energy proponents, young people, old people, basically all kinds of people fought it nonstop. I want to tell you about a few of them. Marvin Winstead is a Nash County sweet potato farmer and jack of all trades. I first met Marvin in November of 2016 at a press conference in Fayetteville when I was fresh off the Appalachian Trail and we were all still reeling from Trump's election. Marvin spoke at the press conference about the 36-inch diameter, 1,400 PSI Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which Dominion proposed to bury within just a few hundred feet of his house. If the pipeline were to be built, Marvin would live nearly in the exact middle of a 1-mile wide blast zone. In the event of a leak and explosion, he and everything around him would be incinerated. Why then, Marvin asked, do regulations allow the pipeline company to use thinner walled pipe as a cost-saving measure in rural areas than is used elsewhere? Why, he demanded, is my life worth less than someone else's? And it wasn't just Marvin's safety the company and the state of North Carolina proposed to sacrifice, but his livelihood as well. As planned, the pipeline would perfectly bisect Marvin's farm. Not only would this permanently destroy fertility in acres of disturbed soil, but it would also mean that heavy farm machinery would not even be allowed to be driven over the pipeline, effectively cutting 1/2 of Marvin's farm off from the other half. During sweet potato harvest, tractor trailers are driven directly into the fields, and they are heavy enough to damage a high-pressure pipe buried only 4 feet below the surface. According to the company's land agents, who relentlessly hounded Marvin and his neighbors to sign easement agreements, a pipeline is totally benign apart from some minor inconvenience during construction. The company wouldn't acknowledge, much less pay for, ongoing impacts on farm operations. The larger issue, however, is the damage done to real estate market values. How many homebuyers, after all, will fail to notice the potential in-ground bomb running just past the driveway and ruining the nice impression made by the azaleas and the screened front porch? They don't. And that's why when pipeline companies first draw up a route map, they're drawing a line hundreds of miles long through families who will be expected to sacrifice hard-won generational wealth. Marvin is a smart guy and understood all of this right away. He knew that despite the slick promotional materials and the lavish promises made to local politicians, the company was a brawler, willing to use pain and intimidation to get its way. The steady stream of letters people received in their mailboxes were brusque and to the point. Sign now for the amount we offer or risk being taken to court. Agents would time in-person visits to elderly landowners for when they knew that adult children were away. They badgered people to allow surveyors onto their property, telling them that delaying preliminary work would only mean that neighbors would receive better offers from the company than those who waited. Everything they did was meant to reinforce a single message. Nothing and no one will stop this pipeline, so you may as well surrender now. But Marvin didn't surrender. Trees were felled for hundreds of miles in both directions as the company prepped for construction, but never on his Nash County farm. As promised, he was summoned to court to defend against the company's claim of eminent domain as established by the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, granted to the ACP by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Unable to win outright under the twisted logic of current laws, Marvin and his lawyer nevertheless were able, over multiple court appearances, to convince a judge that ACP should not be allowed to cut trees or otherwise damage Marvin's land until its many outstanding permits and legal obstacles elsewhere were resolved. This went on for years. Meanwhile, Marvin worked hard to make sure that day never came, working with allies across the state and piling up miles on his old truck to offer his hard-won knowledge and expertise in pipeline resistance wherever it was needed. On July 5th, Marvin's perseverance was rewarded when the ACP was defeated. Now, it's not exactly earth-shattering news to hear that persistence pays dividends. It's merely so rare that when it happens, it always comes as a surprise and forces us to reconsider everything else we assume to be impossible. Pipelines can be fought and stopped. Can renewable energy ever catch up to coal? As a matter of fact, it just did. In the first 5 months of 2020, renewables in the United States for the first time produced significantly more electricity than either coal or nuclear power. Can our country ever address racial justice in a substantive way? Maybe that's beginning to happen too. Honestly, how many of us foresaw the widespread removal of monuments to heroes of white supremacy, the name changes to military bases, or these suddenly serious conversations about reparations for slavery, or defunding militarized police departments? But while it's possible to wrestle a foe, even a powerful one, and win, we can't count on walking away unscathed. If we walk away at all, it's going to be with a limp. The ACP, without ever being built, left us with damaged forests, streams, and riverbanks. There are 6 pipe yards scattered now across 3 states in which mountains of unused pipe have sat exposed to the elements for years. Their toxic anti-corrosive coatings damaged by UV rays and flaking away carcinogenic contaminants into our surface waters. Other damage is less tangible. I think of my friend Tom Clark, a retired firefighter in Cumberland County. Probably no one in North Carolina was more happy to hear of the ACP's demise than Tom. He, like Marvin, was an ever-present gadfly during the pipeline fight, always at protests, county commission meetings, DEQ, the state attorney general's office, and the governor's office. Tom lifted his personal motto, "Not one step back," from the Reverend William Barber, and reminded us at every opportunity that we had to live those words if we were to succeed. Tom made a full-size prop from a hula hoop modeling the actual size of the pipeline and carried it with him wherever he went. He was always there and never gave up. But I watched Tom's eyes fill with tears and his gentle heart break so many times. It broke at the callous indifference of wealthy Duke and Dominion executives destroying lives and dreams in communities they've never even visited. It broke at the betrayal of a Democratic governor who traded a required water permit for ACP for what was basically a $58 million bribe. Most of all, though, it broke at the apathy of friends and family who were unwilling to join in defense of their common home. Tom's house lay adjacent to the proposed route. The pipe itself would have been buried on another parcel belonging to a family member, but the strain of it weighed heavily on Tom, as all of the land originated with the beloved grandfather who had bought it specifically to provide a permanent place for later generations of his family. It was a blow then when chainsaw crews from ACP came one day and dropped the massive pine tree the family had always referred to as the grandfather tree. It, like all the trees they cut, was left lying on the ground to rot. Something similar happened to the Holleran family in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania in 2016 when crews for the Constitution Pipeline, protected by U.S. Marshals brandishing assault rifles, cut 550 large trees on the family farm. These weren't just any trees either, but were the basis of the family's commercial maple sugaring operation, which was 90% destroyed by Constitution's eminent domain, seizure, and destruction. As with the ACP, the Constitution Pipeline was subsequently abandoned. That's doubtless some consolation for the Hollerans, but nothing will bring back those trees in their lifetimes. It's absurdly cruel, the talk you often hear of paid protesters. In the ACP fight, people like Tom and Marvin lived sunup to sundown for 6 long years with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline gnawing a hole in their minds. Their regular wages were nothing more than stress and exhaustion, sweetened though those were by many new friendships forged with comrades around the state, also making sacrifices for the same goal. In the Black Lives Matter movement, of course, the stakes are even higher. It says a lot about the character of people who ignorantly assume grassroots movements could only exist if people get paid. It's not payment that fuels movements, but pain. I'm reminded of John Lewis's last words published in the New York Times on the day of his funeral. Lewis wrote, "Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never, ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could have easily been me." In the end, I can't think of any more apt example for a sermon about Jacob wrestling with an angel than the life and person of John Lewis. Like Jacob, Lewis never gave up, continuously fighting for justice and human dignity in a lifetime spent getting into what he called good trouble, necessary trouble. Like Jacob, he also carried the marks and scars from these battles in his own body after being beaten by baseball bats, chains, lead pipes, and stones, and his skull fractured by a policeman's club on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But the part that truly matters, that gives lasting value to our persistence, and which can exalt our suffering into a tool for redemption, is when we, like Jacob, like John Lewis, choose for it to mean something. For Lewis, like King, this was the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Lewis never failed to model the self-effacing and self-affirming radical commitment to reconciliation, which alone can make such a vision into reality. Friends, we know ourselves to be beset with adversaries on all sides. With apologies to John Lewis and other saints who have gone on before, I don't think our human family has ever faced such a dire moment as this one. But our way forward, at least, follows a path others have traveled before. It is as familiar as Jacob by the Jabbok Stream or John Lewis on that bridge over the Alabama River in 1965. We must overcome weariness, accept infirmity, and continue to wrestle until we have secured a blessing of renewed life for ourselves, our descendants, and our one world home, that we might offer then the same doxology as Jacob. I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Here are John Lewis's final words as our benediction. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all that I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolent, is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Amen.
Mercy friends, we are very grateful that we can begin this time with joys. We are glad that Jasmine and Mike and Jubilee and Nova were able to move this weekend into their new home, and it was with the help of a lot of Mercy movers, so thanks be to God. And also, we are celebrating today that it is Brian Graves' birthday, and it is also his 10th anniversary with us as a music leader and coordinator for our Circle of Mercy. So we begin this prayer time in thanksgiving for the gift of the beautiful music that he has helped us sustain over all these years. And Dale will come and offer a word on behalf of the band.
Today, Brian Graves completes his 10th year as musical director of the Circle of Mercy. We want to celebrate with Brian the end of his probationary period. 10 years ago, we posted a job opening for musical director for small, unruly congregation with eclectic musical tastes and theological backgrounds. Duties include accompanist, song leader, vocal soloist, and liturgist. Other duties as needed. That's a phrase that would come back to haunt Brian in the years to come. Ideal candidate will have advanced degree in theology to negotiate combining traditional hymns with progressive lyrics and pronouns. Part-time position, no benefits, salary in the high two figures. And over the next few weeks, a resume poured in. Brian learned quickly the meaning of other duties as needed. Serve as musical director for regional youth camp, sing and lead songs in Spanish, Latin, and various African languages. Write new lyrics for traditional hymns and songs. Write original lyrics and melodies. Lead small band of variable size, skill level, and instrumentation. Arrange music for the band. Serve as music librarian. Learn music software to generate scores and parts. Lead music in worship via Zoom. Other duties as needed. Watch this space. Coming from a background in jazz and commercial music, I had to adjust to Brian's unorthodox style as a band leader. Here was a musical director who didn't complain or swear or lose his temper. He was relentlessly patient, understanding, and good-natured. He didn't hog the limelight. Here was a band leader who helped set up and strike the equipment. When working with musicians from beginners to seasoned professionals, Brian has been kind, generous, nurturing, and appreciative. Brian gave me the opportunity to say something I had never before heard or spoken in my life. Please turn up the volume on your guitar. Many thanks and many blessings, Brian, for sharing your music and your spirit with the Circle of Mercy community. We wanted to show you our gratitude by buying you something that we knew that you didn't have, an electric guitar, but given the current economy and COM finances, we had to scale things down a bit, and I suggest you scale down your expectations too. But it's right over here. And in lieu of your next year's salary, we have a small gift for you.
Friends, we want you to know that that particular beautiful tribute to Brian came not with a canned laugh track, but it actually came with live laughter. And I can hear your laughter now. So we thank Dale for bringing this word on behalf of the band, on behalf of all of us, and our great gratitude for Brian in all these years of beautiful music and being such a great spirit. So thank you, Brian. When I was beginning my ministry as a pastor, I thought that I should get a prayer life. So I found a spiritual director to help me. I remember my first meeting with her. I pulled out my notebook and I asked her what books on prayer she would recommend. She smiled and she said, "I have no list for you. We will not be reading about prayer. We will pray." Uh-oh. There went my favorite way of attending to my heart. I called it a heart bypass. Bypassing my heart so I could stay more comfortably in my head. But week after week and month after month, we prayed. She taught me to come to God with all that I am. My confusion, my fears, my restlessness, my heartaches, my longings, my joys. And she wanted me to listen. Listen to my body and soul, and listen to the cries of my body and soul, and listen to the cries of the world and in all of its agony and all of its wonder. She's kept saying, they're connected. And as I prayed, I listened and struggled and discovered how much prayer is a stripping away of anything that hindered me from experiencing the presence of God, the seeing of God life around me, and knowing deeply the love of God for me and all the life around. So prayer is a practice of seeing. I usually experience a great disconnect these days between what my heart longs to say and the words that come out. I practice what I know to be at home with you in this world, within myself. But here's the part that I can say without that disconnect. I long to see you. I long to be in your presence. I long for us to experience together God's presence. And I trust that even though I can't see you, that you are there. So is the Holy One. And God can still do far more than we can ever imagine to bring us into that love that will not let us go. And so I offer you an eyes wide open prayer of blessing, and trust that God's going to catch these words and do something with them, so by the time they reach your ears, they can travel to your heart, and we are able to pray together. So we thank God again for the gift of life this day, for one more day of wonders never ceasing. We thank God for music that carries our heart songs of gratitude as well as grief. May we live into the words of John Lewis' hope for us. Be kind. Be mindful. Be particular. Make it plain. Make it simple. Make it sing. And as our children and our young people and our teachers and our parents, as they begin and as they are preparing for this school year, may unexpected blessings come out of the burdens. May a way be found. May strength be given still to everyone struggling through these days, body, mind, and spirit. May God grant us bold courage to keep stepping out for truth and justice in spite of the delayed evidence of change. And may God grant us quiet courage to say at the end of each day, I will try again tomorrow, to keep God's strength from ebbing away. May God's irresistible and irrepressible vision for this world hold our gaze steady in hope. And when we rise, let us rise up like a bird, joyfully. And when we fall, let us fall down like a leaf without regret. May the peace of Christ stay with you all.
Somos pueblo que camina por la senda del dolor. Acudamos jubilosos a la santa comunión. Los humildes y los pobres, inclinados ante Dios. Acudamos jubilosos a la santa comunión. Este pan que Dios nos brinda alimenta nuestro amor. Acudamos jubilosos a la santa comunión. Cristo aquí se hace presente, abriremos en su amor. Acudamos jubilosos a la santa comunión. Los sedientos de justicia buscan su liberación. Acudamos jubilosos a la santa comunión. We are people on a journey, pain is with the soul away. Joyfully we come together at the holy feast of God. God has sent the invitation to the humble and the poor. Joyfully we come together at the holy feast of God. This is bread that God provides us, nourishing our unity. Joyfully we come together at the holy feast of God. Christ is ever present with us to unite us all in love. Joyfully we come together at the holy feast of God. All who truly thirst for justice seek their liberation here. Joyfully we come together at the holy feast of God. Joyfully we come together at the holy feast of God.
The song we just sang, We Joyfully Come Together at the Holy Feast of God, are beautiful words in that song. But as Nancy was saying earlier, I am often feeling quite a disconnect between what is bubbling up within my heart and spirit and the words that don't seem to come easily. As I was listening to our band play that song and Brian sing, I felt within myself a deep sadness at coming to this table and you all not being here. I miss you walking through this line and holding the bread for you and putting the bread in your hands, of holding this cup and maybe gently touching your hand as you hold the other side of the cup when you dip your bread in. I miss holding this bowl and offering blessings with oil. I remember one of the last times that we were able to gather here. I think it might have been the last time we shared communion in person. All of the things about COVID were starting to bubble up, and we were having conversation about how do we do this? Do we do communion? And I remember standing here serving communion, and he cleaned his hands before he did it, and he broke off the bread and dipped it and gently dropped it into each of your hands. So even though you can't be with us here around this table today, I find hope in knowing that your presence is here at this table. You're here with us in our hearts, in our minds, and in our spirits. Jesus knew that his disciples would be walking through a time of unknown, a time of separation, when he shared his last meal with them. So he took the bread and gave thanks for it, and he broke it. And he said, "Friends, this is my body given for each of you. Every time you share a meal and break bread together, I want you to remember me." In the same way, he took the cup and gave thanks and said, "This is the cup of the new covenant poured out for you and for many. Every time you drink from this cup, remember me." So friends, you might be joining us now with the communion elements in your home. But I invite you in the week ahead as you sit down for meals, either by yourself or with family, and remember that every time you break the bread, the presence of Christ surrounds you, is within you, and goes with you always. Come to this table that's been prepared for you.
Roll out with joy, feel it folk with peace. The mountains and hills will break forth before you. There'll be shouts of joy. All the trees of the field will clap their hands. And all the trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands as you go out with joy. Go out with joy, feel it folk with peace. The mountains and hills will clap before you. Shout your praise. All the trees of the field will clap their hands. And all the trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands as you go out with joy.
We give thanks to Greg Yost for offering our reflection today. Thank you, Greg. And many thanks to the band and Brian for the beautiful music, and Mark for recording the service, and we give thanks for all of you who are here with us in spirit. Go in peace.